January 7th, 2025. It is 10:30 in the morning in Pacific Palisades, California, and the state's fire season has been over for 2 months. The acreage counter stopped in the autumn. The federal crews stood down. On paper, the dangerous part of the year is behind Los Angeles. Then the wind turns around. High pressure over the Great Basin sends desert air down through the canyons of the transverse ranges, heating and drying as it falls, and it reaches the coast at 99 miles per hour with the humidity in single digits. It finds a hillside that 2 wet winters filled with grass and 1 dry autumn cured into tinder. By 6:18 that evening, a second fire is burning above Altadena on the far side of the county. By nightfall, every firefighting aircraft in Southern California is grounded. By 3 in the morning, the water tanks serving Pacific Palisades are empty. 24 days later, 31 people are dead, and 16,246 buildings are gone. The most destructive urban fire event in modern California history. It happened in January. Woolsey happened in November. Thomas happened in December. Los Angeles does not burn during fire season. It burns after fire season ends, and that window is getting wider every year. To understand what is coming for Los Angeles, you have to go back and look at a calendar. Every year, the country watches California's fire season the way it watches a hurricane season. There is a start, roughly in June. There's a peak, somewhere in August and September. There is an end, when the autumn rains arrive and the acreage counters stop climbing. News crews go out in July. Federal resources surge in August. By November, the story has moved on. Look at what has actually destroyed Los Angeles neighborhoods, and that calendar falls apart. The Woolsey fire began in November. The Thomas fire began in December. And the 2 fires that erased more of Los Angeles than anything in the modern record, the Palisades Fire and the Eaton Fire, began on the 7th of January. None of them happened during fire season. All of them happened after it had officially ended. This is not a coincidence, and it is not bad luck. It is the product of 2 windows that used to sit apart on the calendar and are now sliding into each other. The first window is the period when the hillside fuels around Los Angeles are dry enough to carry a fire. The second window is the period when the Santa Ana winds blow. For most of the last century, the first window closed at roughly the same time the second one opened, and the overlap between them was narrow. That overlap is now wider than it has ever been in the instrumental record. It is getting wider every decade, and everything that happened on the 7th of January, 2025, happened inside it. The setup for that day began 2 years earlier, and it began with rain. The winters of 2023 and 2024 were unusually wet across Southern California. That water did what water does on a Los Angeles hillside. It grew things. Grasses came in thick across the slopes above Altadena and through the canyons behind Pacific Palisades. Light brush filled in underneath. For 2 seasons, the hills around the city were greener than they had been in years, and to anyone driving the canyon roads, it looked like the opposite of a fire problem. Grass and light brush are the fastest curing fuels in California. The moisture that grows them is gone within months. The fuel they leave behind is not. Climate scientists have a name for this sequence. Daniel Swain and his colleagues call it hydroclimate whiplash. The increasingly violent swing between very wet and very dry states, with less and less time spent anywhere in between. Their analysis, published in Nature Review's Earth and Environment, found that the frequency of these swings has risen from around 31% to around 66% since the 1950s, and that the increase is still accelerating. A warmer atmosphere holds more water when it is wet and pulls more moisture out of the ground when it is dry. It does both jobs harder. For Los Angeles, whiplash is not an abstraction. It is a 2-step. Step 1, a wet winter grows, an enormous quantity of fine fuel across ground that would otherwise be bare. Step 2, a hot summer and a dry autumn cure that fuel into something that will carry a flame front at a walking pace. By the autumn of 2024, Step 1 and Step 2 were both complete. Then something happened that used to be rare and is no longer. The rain did not arrive. California's wet season has an onset date, and that date has been moving. Across multiple decades, fall precipitation in the state has been declining, and the practical effect is that the start of the rains has slipped later by close to a month. Fuels that would once have been soaked by the end of November now stay dry into December and sometimes into January. That matters because of what the calendar does next. Santa Ana winds are a cold season phenomenon. They form when high pressure builds over the Great Basin and air spills downhill toward the lower pressure at the coast. As it descends, it compresses. As it compresses, it heats. As it heats, it dries. It funnels through the passes and canyons of the transverse ranges and accelerates, and it arrives in Los Angeles as a blast of interior desert air with relative humidity in the single digits. It also arrives from the wrong direction. The wind that normally governs Los Angeles comes off the ocean, cool and damp. and it pushes inland. A Santa Ana does the reverse. It blows offshore from the interior toward the sea, which means a fire in the foothills does not burn up into empty terrain. It runs downhill into the city, with the neighborhoods in front of it and the ocean at the far end. The peak of that wind season is November through January, so here is the overlap, stated plainly. The fuels are cured by late summer and stay cured until the rains come. The rains are coming later, the winds arrive in autumn and peak in winter. Every year that the wet season starts a little later, the number of days when Los Angeles has both a cured hillside and a Santa Ana blowing across it goes up. In the first week of January 2025, the National Weather Service began issuing warnings for an extreme offshore wind event. Forecast gusts of 70 to 80 miles per hour. Locally, 100. The language was unusually direct. The event was described in advance as life-threatening and destructive. The warnings were correct. They just did not matter as much as anyone hoped. There is one more piece of the setup, and it is the piece almost nobody knows. On the morning of the 1st of January, 2025, a fire started in the hills above Pacific Palisades. It was called the Lockman Fire. Crews responded to it, they suppressed it, and they released the scene. On paper, it was over. Underneath, it was not. Federal investigators later concluded that the fire continued to burn below the surface in root systems and duff, invisible from above. Fires do this. They are called holdovers, and they can persist for days or weeks without any surface expression at all, waiting for oxygen and wind. For 6 days, that fire smoldered under a hillside on the western edge of Los Angeles while the city went back to work. On the 7th of January, the Santa Ana arrived. The holdover surfaced, and at roughly 10:30 in the morning it was reported as a new incident under a new name. The Palisades Fire. A 29-year-old former rideshare driver named Jonathan Rinderknecht was later arrested on a federal complaint alleging he had maliciously started the New Year's Day fire. His federal trial ended in a mistrial when the jury deadlocked, and the indictment was subsequently revised. That case is unresolved, and it is not the point of this story. The point is the mechanism. A fire that was declared out on New Year's Day became the deadliest fire in the modern history of Los Angeles 6 days later, and nobody in the city knew it was still there. By 5 in the afternoon, the Palisades Fire has burned 1,262 acres. At roughly 6:18 that evening, a second fire is reported. This one is in Eaton Canyon, above the community of Altadena, at the base of the San Gabriel Mountains on the other side of the city. 2 ignitions, hours apart, on opposite flanks of Los Angeles County under the same wind. And the wind is now doing the thing that no amount of money solves. Modern wildfire suppression depends on aircraft. Air tankers lay retardant lines ahead of a fire. Helicopters drop water directly on the head. In a normal incident, they are the difference between a fire that is contained at 50 acres and one that is contained at 5,000. Above roughly 40 miles per hour, they cannot fly. The turbulence over burning terrain becomes unsurvivable, and a retardant drop released into a wind that strong does not land where it is aimed. On the evening of the 7th of January, water and retardant aircraft across Southern California are grounded. In the San Gabriel Mountains north of Pasadena, a gust of 99 miles per hour is measured. This is the structural problem at the center of the Los Angeles fire threat, and it has no budget solution. The most effective suppression tool available to the modern fire service is unavailable during precisely the conditions in which Los Angeles burns. Every dollar spent on aircraft buys capability for the fires that were never going to destroy the city. On the day that matters, the fleet sits on the ramp. The fires run all night with no air support at all. And on the ground, the fire is not advancing the way most people picture it. It is not a wall of flame moving across a hillside at a steady pace. In a wind event like this one, it advances as a shower. Burning fragments, pieces of bark, leaf, fence, roof, are lifted off the fire and carried forward, sometimes a mile or more ahead of the front. They land in rain gutters full of dry needles. They land on wooden decks. They land in the vents under an eave, which are open by design so the attic can breathe. Houses do not catch fire because the flame front reached them. They catch fire because an ember did, hours earlier, and burned quietly in a gutter until the roof went. That is why the burn pattern in these neighborhoods looks the way it does afterward. One house gone, the next one untouched, the third one gone. It is not random. It is a record of which small openings happen to catch something. In the Palisades, the fire moves through the canyons faster than the roads can empty. The community sits on hillsides, threaded by a small number of arterial roads, and those roads are now carrying everyone who is trying to leave in the same direction at the same time. Traffic stops. People get out of their cars and walk. Bulldozers are eventually brought in to push abandoned vehicles off the pavement so that fire apparatus can get up the hill. That image is the whole problem in one frame. The escape route and the response route are the same road, and both of them are full. Higher up, the crews notice something else. The hydrants are going soft. Water pressure in the Palisades highlands begins to drop. Then it drops further. By approximately 3 a.m. on the 8th of January, the 3 1-million-gallon tanks that serve Pacific Palisades have run dry under what officials describe as extreme demand. Below them, on the hillside, sits the Santa Ynez Reservoir, 117 million gallons of capacity, offline and completely empty. It had been drained in early 2024 after a tear was discovered in its floating cover, taken out of service to satisfy safe drinking water rules while repairs were arranged. The repairs had not happened. The crews shift to what is left. Water tenders shuttling loads up the canyon roads that are already gridlocked. Portable pumps drafting out of backyard swimming pools. And this is the part where the obvious conclusion is wrong. The empty reservoir became the defining scandal of the Palisades fire. It is easy to understand why. 117 million gallons of water sitting unused above a neighborhood that burned to the ground while firefighters worked dry hydrants is not a subtle image. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power moved to hire an independent engineer. The state opened its own review, and the California agencies came back with a finding that is far more disturbing than the scandal it replaced. Even a full Santa Ynez reservoir, they concluded, could not have influenced the outcome. The flow rate available from the system would have been insufficient to keep the hydrants working regardless. A full reservoir would not have held the pressure either. Sit with what that means. The water system did not malfunction. It performed inside its design envelope. It simply had the wrong design. A municipal water system is engineered to fight structure fires, a handful of them in different parts of the service area at different times. Every pipe diameter, every pump rating, every tank in that network was sized against that assumption. What happened in the Palisades was not a handful of structure fires. It was hundreds of them, simultaneously, in one small elevated zone, all drawing from the same tanks. No American city has a municipal water system built for that. Not one. The pipes under Los Angeles are not unusually weak. They are ordinary. The assumption written into them is the same assumption written into the pipes under every city in the country, and the assumption is that 1,000 houses will not be on fire at the same time. That is the second thing that will still be true the next time the wind blows. Across the county, the Eaton fire comes down out of the canyon into a town of roughly 40,000 people, at night, on a wind that is still building. Altadena sits directly beneath the San Gabriel Mountains, and the mountains rise fast behind it. The canyons above town are oriented so that the Santa Ana flow accelerates straight down them and into the streets. Power is out across large areas. Circuits had been de-energized as a precaution. Many residents have no lights, no internet, and no television as the fire arrives. What they have is a phone, and the phone is where the warning would come from. In the eastern half of Altadena, evacuation orders begin going out at around 7:25 in the evening, less than an hour after flames were first spotted in the canyon. In the western half, everything west of Lake Avenue, the evacuation order is issued at 3:25 in the morning. 8 hours separate one side of a single town from the other. 19 people died in the Eaton fire. 18 of them died west of Lake Avenue. West Altadena is a historically black community, one of the most established black middle-class neighborhoods in Southern California, with a large population of long-tenured elderly homeowners. The California Attorney General opened a civil rights investigation into the emergency response there, examining whether race, age, or disability played any role in the delay and in the disparities that followed. The congresswoman representing the area publicly demanded an independent review. That review came. In May of 2026, Los Angeles County released findings from an independent investigation by Citygate Associates, which examined the evacuation decisions, the incident communications, and the fire behavior during the critical hours. The report concluded that the evacuation orders were not delayed. The community does not accept that finding, and this documentary is not going to resolve the dispute. Both things are on the record, and both belong in the story. An independent review found no delay. 18 of 19 people died on the side of the street that was told last. Anthony Mitchell Sr. had lived in Altadena for more than 20 years. He worked in sales. He was an amputee, and he used a wheelchair. His adult son Justin had cerebral palsy and used one too. On the night of the 7th of January, as the Eaton fire came down into their neighborhood, Anthony Sr. called for an ambulance. 2 men in wheelchairs cannot self-evacuate from a house in the dark with the power out and the wind at 60 miles an hour. They needed help to leave. He asked for it, and he waited. The ambulance never came. Both of them died in the house. When the family was finally told what had been found, they learned that Anthony Sr. had been found beside his son's bed. He had not tried to get himself out. He had gone to Justin, and he had stayed. His surviving son, Anthony Mitchell Jr., put it this way in an interview afterward. He believed in family, he said, and I think that's one of the reasons it cost him his life, because he wasn't going to leave my younger brother. There is a version of this story that treats that as a tragedy of individual circumstance. It is not. It is a description of exactly how a delayed warning kills, and of exactly who it kills first. Warning time is not distributed evenly, because the ability to use it is not distributed evenly. A healthy adult with a car and a full tank can convert 20 minutes of notice into a successful evacuation. A man in a wheelchair caring for a son in a wheelchair cannot. He needs hours, and a phone call that gets answered, and a vehicle that arrives. The people who need the most warning time are systematically the people who receive the least, because they are the ones who cannot compensate when the system runs late. Every hour of delay lands hardest on them. It landed on a house on the west side of Lake Avenue, on a father who would not leave his son, and it is the single clearest measure of what those 8 hours actually cost. As this is being made, California is having a quiet year. Roughly 1,720 fires have burned about 53,981 acres across the entire state, with 13 structures destroyed and no deaths. The largest active incidents are modest, a few thousand acres near Big Sur, a few thousand more in Humboldt County. By any normal reading of a fire season, this is good news. It is not good news for Los Angeles, and this is the thing to take away. A mild summer does not reduce the risk to Los Angeles. It banks fuel for the winter. The fires that destroy the city do not occur inside the season that the counters measure. They occur in the weeks after everyone has stopped counting, when the hillsides are still dry, the rains have not come, and the wind turns around and blows out to sea. Everything structural is still in place. Los Angeles mapped very high fire hazard. Severity zones have grown from roughly 647,000 acres in 2011 to over 817,000 acres today. The hazard map expanded. It did not shrink. Around 1.3 million structures in Los Angeles County now sit in areas where a wind-driven ember can reach them. Aircraft will still be grounded above 40 miles per hour. The water system is still sized for a handful of house fires. The building codes for the highest hazard zones are among the strictest in the country, and they apply to new construction, not to the hundreds of thousands of existing homes with open eaves, unscreened vents, and wooden decks. And in April of 2026, the Santa Ynez Reservoir was drained again after new leaks were found. The same reservoir, empty again. The residents who lived through the fire were not quiet about it. Los Angeles was not unlucky on the 7th of January. It was exposed on a day when the wind came and the calendar said the danger was over. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Documentaries like this one take a long time to research and put together, and if you got something out of it, a like, a comment, or a subscribe genuinely helps more than you'd think. Stay safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.